Journey, your television passport to the exciting, colorful world of adventure, as seen through the eyes of real people. Here to present the actual films of tonight's journey is John Stevenson.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight's journey is an unusual one indeed, taking us behind the scenes to the land of make-believe in Hollywood, California. This is the famous Viewmaster, and this small disc is a three-dimensional sequence of slide reel into the Viewmaster, press the button, and there in gorgeous color is a three-dimensional sequence of exciting films. But even more exciting is the story of how these three-dimensional slides are made. We'll see tonight's guest, Mrs. Ingeborg Green, being charged and thrown to the ground repeatedly by a tame but awfully heavy lion. For the sake of a single snapshot in 3D, we'll see Mrs. Green dive to the bottom of the Pacific Ocean in a simulated treasure hunt. And also included in tonight's absorbing film are sequences from Robin Hood, from the immortal classic Robinson Crusoe, and from famous biblical stories we all know so well. Our episode is entitled Ingeborg in Hollywood. I'd like to introduce our very talented guest, who was educated in Norway and found her life's work in fabulous Hollywood, USA, Mrs. Ingeborg Green. Mrs. Green, I'm sure that most of us are familiar with this three-dimensional Viewmaster, but I don't think that any of us realize the tremendous amount of work that goes into the making of a single three-dimensional snapshot.
Well, actually, the shooting with this little camera, like so, is the very simple part of it. The adventure part of it is the finding the locations, getting the right characters to play the parts, and getting everybody on time for the shooting and the weather right, etc. This makes it a lot of fun.
And that's the part we're going to see right now. Here is the behind-the-scenes story, ladies and gentlemen, of how the mushrooming three-dimensional industry comes into your home. Here to describe these films is our Hollywood stunt woman, Mrs. Ingeborg Green.
John, we're working on a story in 3D still photographs of African animals. Our first project is to get pictures of me fighting a ferocious lion.
Uh-oh.
I'd like to apologize right now for the way the lion is behaving. He's in a playful mood today and just doesn't want to go along with our story.
Well, if this lion is playful, Mrs. Green, I wouldn't want to see you work with him when he meant business.
Well, he is in business, actually. He's Jackie, the MGM lion, and you've seen him in motion pictures. But we haven't much time to jolly temperament, even in the lion. We're on a shoestring budget where every minute counts. We're at a large ranch in the San Fernando Valley. Incidentally, we try to get realistic backgrounds in all our stories. And this is the way much of Africa looks.
Well, Jackie looks authentic enough, too.
Yes, John, but he isn't cooperating yet.
He's still fooling? Well, isn't there anything you can do, Mrs. Green?
Well, animals instinctively go for your throat, even in play. I tease him to do that.
Oh.
But you have to be careful to protect yourself. That's why I have my arm in front of my face. It's a hot day here in the valley, and Jackie doesn't have to worry about our budget problems. When he feels like quitting for the day, he just rolls over and stops. Now I'm protecting my face again as we try to get some action in the scene.
Aren't you kind of tempting fate there, Mrs. Green?
Yes, I am tempting fate, John, but you can see that Jackie is still playful.
How much does Jackie weigh?
He weighs about 300 pounds, John. Even the sight of one of our actors pretending to shoot Jackie and save me doesn't arouse the lion at all. He may look vicious, but there was only one real damage. He chewed up my new straw hat. This was his way of showing affection for me.
A strange way to show affection, Mrs. Green. All right, now we've had lions in Africa. What's our next story?
Well, we're going to move on to a picture story of the famous fictional character Robinson Crusoe. Here we are loading the equipment as we set out for the beach. We have to be careful and make sure we have everything we need. Any mistake or delay can be costly. With our small budget, John, we just can't afford to make any mistakes. But everyone in the company pitches in and helps us get off. We're traveling to a cove on the Pacific coast of California near San Pedro. The big Hollywood studios can afford to use backdrops and false rocks, John. But when we do a story like Robinson Crusoe, we have to use the real thing. That's Lou Hippie, by the way, putting on Robinson Crusoe's makeup. This has to be a really durable makeup job, John, because our actors will be spending hours in this cold, cold water. The sharp barnacles and choppy surf don't make things any easier for us. But here we are, setting up our reflectors and making sure we have enough light. Then we have to check with our storyboards, which you will see in a moment, and then arrange the scenes properly.
In other words, these storyboards are like picture blueprints of each scene.
Exactly. You see, we have to tell the whole story in only 21 pictures, John. We can't waste a thing. So we concentrate on the famous scenes and try to get in them as much as possible. This scene is next on our storyboard. It plots the moment when Robinson Crusoe sees the powder keg floating in the water. He's going to jump in and get it while Friday tosses him a line. That board with the fin on it is supposed to be a shark. It's handled by Bob Lemaire, the famous skin diver and aqualung teacher. Notice how lifelike Lemaire makes the fin look by keeping it underwater and swimming in circles. Even from a few feet away, John, you'd have a hard time telling that that wasn't a real shark. That is the way Bob handles it. That's just a sample of the way we work for realism. In every shot, we work away just like beavers.
You know, I can't help but admire, Mrs. Green, the enthusiasm of you and your crew.
Thank you, John. The spirit is contagious, too. Everyone does more than his share of work. And when everyone is working so hard, we're bound to come up with an injury or two. Once in a while, that is.
Fortunately, that doesn't look too serious.
No, it isn't. That's just one of the minor hazards of our work. There's bound to be a scrape or a bump, but we're able to fix everything. And now lunchtime. Salt air and hard morning's work have really given us an appetite.
Well, luckily they sent the right number of lunches, Mrs. Green, or you might have been left out.
Not this Norwegian, John. After lunch, more work, and applying the finishing touches on Friday's makeup. This is one of the first scenes in the story when Friday is about to be burned at the stake by his own people. Robinson Crusoe has kept his beard on and is all ready for the rescue. Before we film the scene, I take one last look at the storyboard for a final check.
Where do you get these storyboards?
They're made up by our creative art director, viewmaster, Perce Crowell. He picks the most famous scenes from the classic stories we decide to shoot, and then gives us drawings from each scene.
Well, I can begin to see now how important these storyboards really are.
We'd be lost without them, John. For instance, in this 3D picture story of Robinson Crusoe, all the guns and many of the props were originally used in the Hollywood motion picture. Now the actors are placed, the reflectors are in position, and the cameras are finally ready to go.
Well, what about this location, Mrs. Green? We're not at the ocean anymore, are we?
No, John. For this scene, we had to pack up and move to a botanical garden near the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. This garden is quite famous for its collection of plants and trees. These scenes show the mutiny of the sailors. This is where the ship from England comes to rescue Robinson Crusoe. There we see a blunderbuss taking a shot at one of the sailors. And this is our little 3D camera. Now we're about to witness the burning of Friday at the stake. And here's where we were truly fortunate, John. These young men you see here aren't really actors. They're exchange students from Nigeria, studying law at the University of California. The young man playing the part of Friday is a real Nigerian prince studying medicine. His name is Aniago Okonu, and we were very thankful that he and his friends took the time to help us.
And a very wonderful job they're doing, too. And you know, I can't help noticing one thing, Mrs. Green. The players all have such convincing gestures and facial expression. Now, as the director, how do you motivate this?
Well, John, we do have those storyboards, you know, and a completely written script. It sort of gives the actors an added picture of what we want. We let the actors speak lines out loud, even though we never do any sound recording. Anything to help the actors get the right feeling. This is important, because we take as many as 30 or 40 pictures of each single scene. We want each 3D color slide to come out just right.
And as Shakespeare said, the play's the thing.
Right you are. Here we are breaking up a few of the props, referring to the spear mainly. And now one more scene before we move into the next story. This is where Robinson Crusoe has been on the island for years, all alone, keeping his calendar on the trunk of a tree. He decides to call his native he rescues Friday, because, according to his calendar, this day is Friday. This is one of the most famous scenes in the world of literature.
And a very touching scene as well, Mrs. Green, which I'm sure you captured on your 3D film. Uh-oh, wait a minute. This character looks familiar. Isn't this going to be Friar Tuck?
Right, John. Another day, another story. Today we've traveled to Sherwood Forest to film the classic story of Robin Hood. Our Sherwood Forest is the Corriganville Ranch in the San Fernando Valley, where Hollywood Western movies are filmed. Looks like what you'd expect the real Sherwood Forest, doesn't it?
It sure does.
And here's our Robin Hood, a good-looking lad named Bob Stewart. Once again, our props are as authentic as possible. The costume Bob is wearing is the same one worn by Errol Flynn in the movie version. We even got the 3 Irish wolfhounds called for in the story.
You know, for a minute I thought we had 3 lions with us this time.
They're as big as lions, John, but they're really very tame, friendly dogs. Our big problem was finding them. They're such a rare breed in California. We had to round them up from all over the county. Of course, that's just a small part of the preparation that goes into making our stories.
And one more way you achieve your amazing results, I might add.
Thank you. Here's Friar Tuck again, and they're all made up and ready to work. Recognize him, John?
I'm not sure.
It's Bob Lemire, the shark man from Robinson Crusoe.
Ah, of course. But he's a versatile and handy man to have around, isn't he, Mrs. Green?
Oh, he certainly is. And when he's not diving or acting, he helps us move cameras and arrange scenes. And here's Donald Jim, a top stereoscopic photographer. He's getting ready to shoot the scene where Friar Tuck signals his men.
Well, it looks like everyone in the company works as a jack of all trades.
Because we all take our work seriously, John. Notice how painstakingly Donald Jim is fussing with the camera, always working toward perfection. Each story is a new challenge, which we treat with the greatest respect. But next, we have an underwater sequence that could have had tragic consequences at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. One of the toughest assignments, John, was this underwater treasure hunt, in which we almost lost a life. The story calls for me to play the part of a girl who's after a sunken treasure. Here I am in my aqualung.
This is another dangerous part of your job, isn't it?
It isn't supposed to be, but we're going to have a real scare, as we'll soon see. In case anything goes wrong, we have a safety diver on top standing by to make a rescue. In our story, the girl follows the trail of a treasure map beneath the sea. That sounds simple enough, but we had a big problem on our hands.
What was that?
We're near Catalina Island, and we had a hard time finding a clear spot in the water where the sun could shine through enough to light up the treasure chest on the bottom.
Uh-huh. But this water certainly seems clear enough to me.
We were lucky to find such a spot, John. It isn't ordinarily this clear. Now we see the girl looking for the chest. And here she is, discovering it.
Say, that chest would fool an experienced pirate.
It does look that way, doesn't it? But this treasure chest would disappoint a pirate. It's nothing more than bicycle taillights, thimbles, buttons, candy, and about $25 worth of costume jewelry.
Oh, no. You mean to tell me that chest is only worth $25?
No, John. The chest had to be made especially for the story. It's worth about $150. Much more than the treasure. Now, the girl is supposed to register surprise. This is very hard to do under a mask. Do you get the idea? She comes back down, and she's going to close the chest in a few minutes after examining and being amazed over this wonderful discovery. Here we see a few small fish floating around, being surprised also. Here I am beckoning to my helper to come down. I have found the treasure, and here's Jim Cutting, a very experienced diver, fortunately, as you will learn as we progress with this little story. And he is having the chest now put on top of it.
This is part of the storyline.
Yes, it is. It's part of our story. He is supposed to be trapped under the treasure chest while I go up to get more help. And we're getting the chest secured on him now, and the surge is very hard to control the chest, even though it's heavily weighted. And he is helping by holding it down.
So the story calls for him to be pinned under this treasure chest.
Yes, and I'm supposed to discover him when I come back to the scene, pinned to the chest, and I'm going for a spare oxygen tank because to all evidences his air is cut off. And you will notice that he actually does cut off his air in order to maintain the true picture. This isn't an illusion of being without air. He actually is not going to be getting air. You will see him turning off his tank in a few moments. He gives me that signal. Now he's turning it off. He'll take his hose out of his mouthpiece out. There's a signal. Now I'm supposed to bring in the tank, which I do. But in bringing in the tank, when I give him the line, his mouthpiece, I twist the air hose. Not intentionally, of course.
Yes.
But it's a very dangerous position to be in, and we're working so fast that
this
we don't
is a very
realize.
tense scene, Mrs. Green.
Well, it is, and he's actually not getting air. Now, if he hadn't been an experienced diver, we could have had serious trouble because he has to jettison himself to the top immediately. And we decide we've had enough for today, John. This is a little bit too dangerous for our blood. We leave the chest at the bottom of the ocean. Anybody can have it now.
Don't worry, Mrs. Green, I'm not going after it. Well, that was certainly a most exciting sequence, Mrs. Green, and it seems to me we've had a little bit of everything. What's our next picture story?
This is our last one, John, and for me it was one of the most satisfying. We were commissioned to make a 3D color slide series on the Christmas and Easter stories.
Well, I imagine this took a great deal of extra research, Mrs. Green.
Oh, yes, it did, John. We spent days and hours at Research Library and found all the authentic costumes and settings in order to keep in line with the authentic Bible stories. We use our own Pacific Ocean here at the Sea of Galilee. There are the disciples of Jesus drawing in their fish nets. They have about 4 dozen bass in there, all fresh fish, too. Farmer's market, you know. And now we're ready for the touching and familiar scene where Jesus is breaking bread and eating the fish with his disciples.
I know there's quite a bit of activity on this set. Was your beach location that cold?
It was quite cold, John, but that wasn't the reason for the activity. We wanted to be as ready as quickly as possible to take advantage of the mist. Our research showed cold a misty day, and we wanted to get it all down on film. I think the mist added the right touch to our pictures.
And here you are traveling again.
Well, we packed up. We finished our little shore scenes on the Galilean Sea, and we're ready to go to Corriganville.
This looks like another biblical setting.
That's right, John. We're back at another section of the Corriganville Ranch, where we were before, taking advantage of their settings. This scene is for the Christmas story and the birth of Jesus. I'm readying the scene where Mary and Joseph rode up to the inn, seeking lodging for the night. I'm sure you remember this part of the Christmas story?
Of course I do.
Now Mary and Joseph are at the front door of the inn. The innkeeper is going to refuse to let them in.
And what are you doing with the basket? Is that part of
Well,
the...
she carried the lunch basket. You know, on the way they stopped for lunch. That's quite one of the familiar scenes.
Final touches by another actor?
Yes, definitely. We're all watching out for little details. Here, of course, they're being refused. The innkeeper refuses Joseph and Mary entrance to the inn. He says they're full. Here are the 3 wise men looking for the newly born Savior. They were sent out by King Herod. They're told to find where Jesus is and tell the king so he can destroy him. And this is our setting for the court of King Herod. Once again, we tried to make a convincing setting. All our costumes for this story were originally used in the big motion picture, The Robe.
Well, the attention you've paid to detail is amazing. I imagine a great many hours are spent on tedious research.
Yes, John. It amounts to several months of study. We are also fortunate to have such an enthusiastic company. We're small and haven't much money to operate with, but we couldn't possibly accomplish what we do without the talent and resourcefulness of our people.
I can imagine.
Here's a bit of last-minute makeup work before we come into the scene where Jesus is taken down from the sepulchre.
I certainly must compliment you and your cast and your actors on their enthusiasm for their jobs.
Well, it's unusual. Everybody helps. We couldn't possibly do it without the enthusiasm and the talent which is given to us. Now we see the 2 Marys, Mary Magdalene and the mother of Jesus. They're going to bathe him and dress his wounds. This is the rock where the Pharisees are trying to bribe the Roman guards not to let anyone into the tomb. They've heard that Jesus will rise again, and they do not want that miracle to happen. These, of course, are the Roman guards. It is said that these costumes actually came from Jerusalem. They were used in the original Bible stories by the motion picture companies, and we were very fortunate to get them because they're very costly. The actor taking the part of Jesus is being prepared for the resurrection scene. And here we have Mary Magdalene sitting in front of the tomb, waiting for Jesus to appear. This is a universal story of the ages. These are the dromedaries used to carry the wise men. And although they're a little stubborn at times, they worked very beautifully for us the day we were out.
When our friends in our audience see these 3D slides that you produce, they'll realize how much work has gone into, how many people have gone in to make this thing a success.
Yes, John, and it takes months of planning. you just have no idea. For a 3 or 4 day shooting, we are 3 months maybe working on the details to get it just right. And the locations must be found, and the light has to be in the right place. And these animals are just not easy to work with. There are many of them untrained.
Whenever you work with animals, I imagine your timetable can be thrown off quite a bit.
Oh, you're so right.
They're so unpredictable.
Absolutely. They never do what you want them to do. Here we are with sheep, and talk about unpredictable. These sheep had never been in the picture. And now we're setting up some of the final scenes. This is the most memorable and inspirational of all. Jesus making ready to deliver the Sermon on the Mount.
Mrs. Green, this has been a unique film. In the short space of a half hour, we've seen moments from some of the best love stories of all time.
Oh, thank you, John. It is time and effort. But there's a great deal of personal enjoyment for me in working out these stories. Sometimes the work is dangerous, sometimes not. But to me, it's always exciting. I know most of your guests have older, more daring accomplishments, but my work is as satisfying to me as though I had just climbed Mount Everest.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Green, for a truly wonderful journey to the land of make-believe. As I mentioned earlier, each of these small film reels, or 3D slides to be more exact, contains a full sequence. How many of these have you filmed, and what were the best known?
I think Rin Tin Tin, John, was one of the best known, The Lone Ranger, and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and just several other of the classics. And then we've done a lot of cowboy series, you know, and with Roy Rogers and Gene Autry and Cisco Kid. And those are great favorites with the kids. And then the zoo series, the animals.
Mrs. Green, I happen to know that you've had quite a colorful experience in the entertainment field. Would you mind telling our audience some of the highlights, please?
Well, John, it's quite infinitesimal compared to what everybody's contributing to this project. I was sort of destined to go into the producing field. My family are Norwegian. Mother's a concert singer, and father was an impresario for artists and wanted to be a theatrical producer all his life. So I was destined to be in the field from the beginning, and he schooled me in sculpturing and designing, stage design, and makeup, every phase that would contribute to the theatrical profession. There wasn't any way I could get out of it. And when I married Lee Green and we got into the three-dimensional live adventures, they just bore fruit. All the talents came into their own.
Well, that sounds like a very solid background for your work. Mrs. Green, when your work involves what Hollywood calls stunt work, like rolling around on the ground with a so-called tame lion, do you have any feelings of fear?
No, John. Actually, I'm not afraid of anything that I can think of just offhand. The action presents a challenge to me, and I think with all of us in life, that's what we meet, a series of challenges. And I find that we can't be fearful in doing that. We have to meet them with a lot of enthusiasm. Even this program is a challenge to me, frankly, and I love being on it.
Well, you're doing very well, Mrs. Green. May I say thank you to you and Mr. Green for this very unusual half-hour presentation. And I hope that when your husband returns from French Guiana that he'll honor us with a visit and show us his true-life adventurous films. Again, thank you very much, Mrs. Green. John Stevenson saying thank you very much and good night.